I've got 20 minutes and I wanted to do 3 things with you. I'm going to introduce you to the world after midnight. I thought I'd share some models and perspectives around knowledge and learning, and I'd also share some examples, just some examples of the kinds of things that we're doing with the Major Projects Knowledge Hub, and you're free to copy those, adapt them to your own activities. I thought I'd start with something a bit risky, if I can get the thing to work. What do I point it at? There we go. So, can anybody recognize the image on the left as you look at it? Does anybody know what that is? That kind of very colourful image? It's the Gulf Stream. And the Gulf Stream is a really good analogy for me for the world before midnight, because this is something that we all take for granted. It's very consistent, it brings warm currents, it brings fertile oceans and a very consistent climate. And we know that there's a risk that the Gulf Stream will change and everything will change. And that will lead us into what Professor Eddie Obeng calls the world after midnight. And I chose this image of people in a train with the world rushing past them to represent the world after midnight. And that's a world in which all the rules are changed. And it's a world in which our ability to learn has actually been far outpaced by the speed of change. And those forces of change are technology, global commerce, politics, social attitudes. And I think that's happening within professions, within membership too. The area where I spend a lot of my time is in project management. And if I asked people in project management who owns project management, some of them would say, oh, it's the Association for Project Management, or it's the Project Management Institute. But they might say, no, it's the British Computer Society. Or they might say it's actually the Design Council, because projects is all about users and experimentation and change. And not only are the roles merging, but actually they're also fragmenting at the same time. So if you look at a project manager of 10, 15 years ago, they would have been pretty much a jack of all trade and doing lots of stuff. Now there are roles like cost engineers, business analysts, delivery managers, change managers. So there's this whole kind of change going on at a huge speed. And I think some of the old certainties of what people want from societies and associations are changing. So that's the context. Let's have a quick look at the learners within this equation. Oh, there we go. So who are your learners? I've identified 4 different types of learner. There are the naturally curious, that's me, and may also be you. You're all here in the room. And these are people whose curiosity you need to pique, you need to stretch them, you need to allow them to share and to teach perhaps, and they might be very interested in unstructured development. They're in it for the love of learning. Then you've got the professionally ambitious. I think those are what many of you would see as the traditional members, people who intellectually get the relationship between learning input and reward. They are very focused on a solution or possibly a PDU, and they need some stuff that's sharp, that's immediate, that's short, that's easily accessible and probably involves only a modest effort. One of the things that's very apparent, again, in the project management world, if you look at the forums of what people are saying, most people, or many people say, right, I need a project management qualification. Which one is easiest, cheapest, and fastest to get? So I think that's your kind of professionally ambitious learner. That's what they're after. We've then got the challenged learner, and this is somebody who they may be struggling in their career and they recognize, I need to change, I need to develop, I need to raise my game. Or perhaps they have a more immediate need. They have a boss who's asked them for something and they have to find out about something in a hurry. So these people are time pressured, they're stressed, they're looking for the fastest possible answer. They're not necessarily interested in ongoing and real learning and development, and their motivation can fade as soon as the crisis fades, or indeed when the next crisis bubbles along the corridor. And finally, you've got the reluctant learner. The person who says, why do I need to learn? I've done this job like this for 20 years. I've been pretty successful. I know my job inside out. What can you teach me? Interestingly, I was at Google yesterday for a workshop. And even Google have got these kind of people who sit there and say, I don't need to learn. I've been here so long, which I found really interesting. So I was going to ask you a question, and I don't know if I have to press this to ask you the question, or whether they... So whoever's doing the kind of questioning thing, I don't know. How do we get a question up? Next slide. Okay. So good. So here's a question for you guys. What kind of learner are you? You may kind of all fall into the same group because you're all in this room. But which of those could you identify? Perhaps identify with? If you'd like to vote using your app. Yes, you have to vote through your app. I'm sorry, I'm causing all sorts of disruption here. Oh, very good. Wow. Oh, that's very groovy, isn't it? Oh, we've got some reluctant learners. But you made it here. That's great. Very good. Excellent. Yeah, I kind of anticipated that many of you would be the naturally curious because you've come to this event. Okay. So if we move on to... no, gone too far. Okay. So we've talked a bit about those learners, who they are. But what is it that they need to learn in the world after midnight? I wanted to help you reflect a bit about the knowledge that your professional members and your learners need. And I'm very grateful to Judy Payne, whose model I've drawn on for this. And Judy talks about knowledge as three things. There's, seem to have gone too far. Knowledge is a thing. So knowledge is a database, or knowledge is a report, or knowledge is a lessons learned report. And this is the kind of knowledge that is explicit and technical, the kind of knowledge that you can capture and record in a journal, perhaps, in a database, in a textbook, for those publishers out there. This is the kind of knowledge that assumes that knowledge doesn't change that fast. So knowledge is a thing, it's a piece of information. You've then got knowledge as a state. What do I know? This covers kind of the explicit knowledge that I've talked about, but it also covers tacit knowledge, your experience. It still assumes that I can show and tell, so I can communicate my knowledge to you guys by talking to you, by showing you, by helping you. And knowledge still is a defined piece. So I'm going to show you how to make an amazing omelette. Yeah, that's a piece of knowledge. Increasingly, I think, in this world after midnight, we have knowledge as an activity, what I do. This is social learning, this is knowledge through observation, and this is very much the world after midnight. It's tapping into unconscious knowledge. It's tapping into some of the things that you may be doing if you're doing projects. So it's tapping into trial and error. It's tapping into experimentation. David Gertine, who is a knowledge management guru, he runs something called randomized coffee trials. And basically what David does is he goes into a large organization, and then once a month he sets up a system that puts people together at random for an hour across that organization. And if they're in the same building or on the same site, they will just meet up. So somebody from accounts will meet somebody from membership services, and they'll just talk about what they do. And it's extraordinary how much knowledge is conveyed and how people learn, because they start saying, oh, I never realized you did that. Oh, that's why we do that. And just the serendipity of learning. And I think in any system that you're developing, you really do need to think about these three things: knowledge as a thing, knowledge as a state, and knowledge as an activity. And I suggest that anything that you develop should reflect that. So we come on to perhaps our next question, which is, how many of you already have somebody whose main role is knowledge management? So if you'd like to vote yes or no. Wow, that was quick. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I was a bit alarmed when everybody said yes to start off with. Okay, so it's still quite rare. Okay, so let's go back, because I think one of the other things you need to think about for your program is who's going to be involved. I think there are a number of roles that you need to think about, because there's a problem with knowledge as a thing and knowledge as a state. A problem with textbooks and online courses. You have to know that you need to know something. So a lot of people don't even know that they don't know something. I'm into Donald Rumsfeld territory here. And you also have to know what you're looking for. You may be aware that you need some piece of knowledge, but how do you ask for it? You struggle to articulate what that might be. And I think the other thing is, it's really quite hard to assimilate a lot of knowledge that's presented to you through a database or through a training course, through a textbook. I brought along my prop for the day. It's actually a pot noodle. And I think this is a good analogy for a lot of knowledge. When we create knowledge as a thing, certainly, and even to a certain extent knowledge as a state, we kind of dehydrate it in order to get it out of our heads and into a database, into a journal, into a book. We have to dehydrate it. The trouble is that many organizations, and I don't know whether your organization is one, they kind of assume that people can then consume the dehydrated product. So here's the database. You could just take the knowledge out. And I don't think that works. I think you actually have to rehydrate the knowledge so that people can recognize it for what it is, and they can properly actually make sense of it and assimilate that. So you have to take out the human, but you have to put the human back in order for people to learn. And that's what these kind of roles involve. You've got the knowledge curator, who is somebody he or she is the blogger, the storyteller, the kind of constructor. I don't know how many of you do word search, but I often think of this as a kind of word search. And if you imagine a word search puzzle, it's just a load of randomized letters. And what the knowledge curator does is they start to help people to trace journeys through the knowledge, through the word search. And you start seeing words, you start seeing ideas appearing. So that's the kind of role of the curator. You've got the knowledge broker. This is somebody who perhaps is a facilitator, somebody who can identify and adapt and communicate the knowledge, because he or she understands the knowledge, but they also understand the context of the people who are trying to learn from the knowledge. And then you've got the knowledge communicator, the kind of person that Lynn was alluding to, somebody who's very good with social media, somebody who has journalistic elements or skills, is looking to use language and opportunity to catch people's interest. So I just wanted to talk about each of those roles in the context of the Major Projects Knowledge Hub and give you a sense of how do you translate that into real life. So one of the things that we do in the Major Projects Knowledge Hub, we do 4 or 5 knowledge campaigns a year. And these are associated with events that the Major Projects Association is running. And they're designed to amplify and increase the learning and reflection around the event. So over a 4-week period, we will curate 2 collections of content around distinct themes that are core to the subject of the event. So recently, we had an event on project closure and operational readiness. So we had one set of information around cracking the handover, and one about the people side of project handover. And These knowledge campaigns will include content that's curated, so there's an introduction, a headline, might curate some information from the Major Projects Knowledge Hub itself, curate some information from the wider web, might include video interviews, and we share it with delegates and we push it out through social media. So that's really the curating knowledge. We're taking a piece of knowledge, or taking an area of knowledge, and we're offering people perspectives on that they can then take and reflect on and learn from. The second role is that of brokering knowledge. Now, we've just started publishing a series of digital scrapbooks, and the first one is on design for manufacturing and assembly. Now, if you're not an engineer, or if you're not in project management, you may have no idea what that involves, but that's really about pre-manufacturing bits of buildings. So rather than turning up with a brickie and building the whole thing from scratch, you've already got modules that you've built off-site, and you bring them to the site and bolt them together. So over the course of 12 months, for a digital scrapbook, we're going to publish 1 page a month. The scrapbook involves an external editor, and it involves external contributors. So these could be members of the association, they could be people from within the society or association. And each page contains original and curated content, infographics, 90-second insight videos, and most of them also contain an event. So the first page of the DFMA scrapbook was collated by the Bartlett School of Architecture, and it offered an introduction to DFMA, and it also included a tour of the Bartlett School of Architecture site, where they've got all these whizzy bits of AI and amazing robots and cutting machines, so people could just actually experience what is the technology associated with DFMA. Scrapbooks, the scrapbooks that we're developing, they will change and develop. We have a rough plan for each 12-month scrapbook, but they will develop as they kind of emerge on the basis of the feedback we get, on the basis of how people engage with the learning and engage with the scrapbook. So you get a sense of this idea of brokering knowledge. We're using members of the Major Projects Association to kind of express their understanding of the subject. So we're actually helping other members understand on the basis of contributions from their peers. So the final role was that of communicating the knowledge, and I use the analogy of a drum kit for this process. So you have your bass drum. So in Major Projects Knowledge Hub terms, those are new resources that are being published in the repository. So we're just taking a load of stuff from the Crossrail Learning Legacy or whatever it is, and so we push that out. That's very much a push medium for knowledge and for ideas. And you might be pushing out your new research, you might be pushing out your new programs, and that's kind of your bass drum activity. You've then got your side drums. So these are the regular, consistent messages that go out to our members and through our hub. So at the moment, Mondays is Send for a Friend Day. Wednesdays is Book of the Week. I used to be a publisher, so I kind of can't get away from that. And Fridays is Shared Insight. So I will curate a piece of knowledge around something that's within the repository. Over 3 or 4 months, I will change those different. So Wednesday in the past, we've looked at podcasts. We've had different kind of themes that we explore. But that's that regular piece of communication that is going out, that is helping people reflect, learn, and engage. And finally, you have your symbols. And these are really the kind of impromptu communication that's connecting with the world around us and the world that Major Projects Association members understand. So news items are quite important and provide an opportunity for connecting with content within the Major Projects Knowledge Hub. So the collapse of Carillion would be a good example of, can do lots around that. I think it's worth thinking about how you can mash these roles together, because you could use your knowledge brokers to produce monthly guest blogs. Over the course of a month, you invite somebody from the association, somebody from the society, or somebody close to it to publish a series of blogs and explore a theme over a course of a month. So it's worth remembering, I think, that this communication activity, a bit like the drum kit, is part of a bigger orchestra, part of a bigger band. So what else are you doing? How do you connect this with what else you're doing? And of course, you can also add other bits of kit to your drum kit. So just looking at that all together, really, we've talked a bit about the knowledge that your developers need. What are they looking for? Are they looking for the badge? Are they looking for the PDU? Are they looking for the qualification? Are they looking for something else? How do you create something that's dynamic? You know, remember, in the world after midnight, knowledge is moving so fast. How do you keep up? And how do you create a development system that can keep up? And how do you integrate this with your other activities? And how do you use the human element? How do you use the people within your organization and your members to help? And how do you give them roles? So I was going to have a final question, which is really around the challenge that you think you face. So if you'd like to vote on that, and we'll see what people say. Nothing's happening. People frantically voting, and it's not. Oh, there we go. Wow, lack of time result. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, the thing about these programs is they do take time, and they do take people, and they do need resources. Excellent. Good. If anybody, I'd very happily show you examples offline. If you wanted me to show you what we're doing and what that looks like in the Major Projects Knowledge Hub, then I can do that. So that's me.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jonathan. So before we get into the panel discussion, are there any questions specifically for Jonathan? Out there, the big bad world. No. Of course I have one. I suppose one of the things that I've encountered a lot of over the years working with societies is how siloed the society is itself. And not that long ago I was in America talking to a major society where there were different people in the room all involved with video in different silos of the society, but they'd never met before. To what extent do you think, is professional development consideration starting to break down those silos? Are people successfully drawing in components from other areas of the same society, or do you still see major barriers internally?
I think there are still major barriers. I'm sure it varies from society to society. Some of those will be people defending their own particular turf within the society. But I think when people are using these kind of techniques and when they're developing the kind of learning community that I'm advocating, then hopefully they're looking at that internally. I mean, Lynn, you were talking about the internal brand, and they're actually trying to develop their own internal learning community as much as they are the external community, because I think this professional development program requires people from within the organization to engage with the organization in order to help members actually learn. So I think most organizations of any size are still very siloed, but it is changing.
All right. Thanks again. Thanks very much.
Thank you.